Set of seminars today for Tales on Tour, Mexico City. My name's Ann Tunerman, founder of Tales the Cocktail. Very grateful that you all are here. This is a fabulous seminar that we have asked Charlotte and Peter to recreate, as it really blew a lot of our minds when she hosted this in New Orleans. And I think there's a lot of surprises you'll learn about how to handle your mint in your bars and restaurants. So on behalf of William Grant and Tales the Cocktail, I want to introduce Charlotte Voisey, the hardest working woman in spirits. So this is her second seminar of the day. She hosted that fabulous party last night, so give her a big round of applause.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to conduct this seminar in English, but before we do that, una noticia en español.
An announcement in Spanish. Yes, we do have live translation services available. If you could all turn around and say thank you to translators at the end of the room. Hi. Without them, we do not have translation. So if you need a headset for the translation, it's in the back of the room.
So welcome to the Mint seminar, which I'm proud to repeat. As Anne mentioned, this was a seminar from Tales of the Cocktail last July in New Orleans that Peter Vestinos and I put together. We had a ton of fun researching the seminar as well as giving it, so we were thrilled to be asked to come back and do this again in Mexico. It's always a pleasure to be down here in Mexico anyhow. Before we start, for the Mexican bartenders in the room, show of hands if you're a Mexican bartender. Okay, so today we are talking about mint, okay? Mint being a category. Within mint, there are many different types of mint. I understand that you guys have Menthe and Yerba Buena, which are different, right? So today we are talking about mint as a category, under which falls Yerba Buena, Menthe, Menthe de manzana, Menthe de ananá, Menthe de lo que hay, okay? So it's a category of mint, and you'll find out that when we speak a little bit more. So to introduce my colleague, Peter Vestinos here from Chicago in the USA. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Peter is a seasoned bartender. He's currently the USBG president in Chicago and runs a bunch of programs in the city and has a lot of consulting. His company is called BarMedic. But more importantly, Peter Vestinos has come up with the Vestinos method, which, trust me, everyone in America is talking about this right now. In fact, after our seminar in New Orleans, the Vestinos method actually broke the internet. It took a few days for everything to recover, okay? All joking aside, Peter has come up with the very best method of preparing mint so that it stays beautiful and fresh on the top of your bar throughout the shift. And that's the part of the seminar that we're most excited about, and we'll get to that. It's about halfway through. It's to stop none of you leaving early, okay? But to start off with, we're just gonna look at, what mint is, where it's come from, a little history of mint. Like anything in the cocktail world, the more knowledge you have, the more understanding you have, and then you can choose to apply that knowledge to your cocktails, to your conversations, to your work as you wish. So a little bit of history just to get us started. So where is mint from? Mint and herbs in general date back millions and thousands of years. Mint is really pretty much from all over the world because it's a very easy plant to grow. It grows everywhere. And there are origins of herbs in biblical times, through medieval times, a long, long history of herbs. One of my favorite stories when we were researching this the first time around was this idea that flowers and herbs, and mint in particular, used to be used to send messages by the way of bunches of flowers. You would send flowers still today to say, I love you, or get well soon, or congratulations. But actually, in the olden days, different flowers had very specific different meanings. And I have a few examples here. For example, peppermint, or common mint, was known to transmit the message of a warmth of feeling. So it was like a warm and fuzzy kind of feeling that you might send to a friend. Things like rosemary were for remembrance, spearmint as well for a warm feeling. And then you get into the Pennyroyal, which is a flower, which was code for flee, run away, get out of here. I guess these were messages that were important back then. Or my favorite, which is lavender, which is distrust or trying to tell somebody that they're very difficult to understand. So next time you get a bunch of flowers or herbs, just have a closer look and sniff, because somebody might be trying to tell you something. Just saying. So we'll move on then. As I said, nowadays, mint, it's native to everywhere, really, because mint can grow in very easy conditions. It's not a very fussy plant. It prefers warm weather, moist weather, like most plants, but it'll pretty much grow everywhere. So what makes mint mint? And again, we're talking about mint, the category, rather than one specific type of mint. There are three things really that makes mint mint, and if you look closely at plants and stems, you'll start to see that. The first thing is that all mints have square stems. If you think of the stem of a herb or a flower, you often maybe think it's round. But mint, the mint family, actually has a square stem. So it's one easy way you can detect if something that looks like mint is actually mint when you're roaming the botanical gardens of your city. Another idea for what makes mint mint is the actual leaf arrangement on the stem. So the leaves actually fall exactly equally opposite to each other. It's not a random protrusion from the stem of the leaves. They actually grow quite orderly. This is another defining component of what makes mint mint. And then finally, the lipped flowers when mint blooms. Like most plants and botanicals and vegetables and things that grow, they often have blooms or flowers that we never come to hear of. You might never have heard of mint blooms or mint flowers before. It's the same for basil and even carrots and potatoes. They often have blooms and flowers. So there's a little part of the mint flower that, again, defines mint to be within the mint category. But there are very, very many different types of mint. We are going to taste some mint together, and on entry we actually set up just 10, I say just 10 varieties of mint that Peter and I know of, and there are many more than that, and we'll tell you about our adventures when we discovered that in just a second. So the Botany of Mint. Botany is the study of anything that grows. It's particularly useful if you're studying gin and understanding botanicals. That's where the word comes from. Mint itself falls under the family of Lamiaceae. You can laugh at my Latin if you want. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. The translation must be kicking in. Perfect. The genus itself is Menthe, so true mints, of which there are about 200 genus or genera, 3,000 species of mint, again, so we're looking at a very broad category, and you'll come to find that even types of sage fall into the mint category. So mint it's a big word. And then you have the botanical name for every type of mint, which we're not going to go through, because if you thought that Latin pronunciation was bad, you should hear me try and translate them all, right? But it's more about the common name. So again, mint is thrown out as the common word for this whole category. And the last thing here is that mint is a botanical that hybridizes. So you have hybrids of types of mint very easy, very quickly. So it's almost impossible, actually, to keep up with how many different types of mint there are. It's the same with a lot of different botanicals, even citrus fruits, right? There were 3 citrus fruits originally. I believe it was the pomelo, the mandarin, and the lemon. I might be wrong, but there was 3 like that. And then every other citrus fruit you've ever heard of, including the lime and the orange, have become hybridizations of those kind of found in fruits. It's the same with mint. So the category is almost infinite, one might say. Botany in general, just a quick side, if you are interested, the guy you should look up is Carl Linnaeus. He kind of defined categorization and organization of botany back in the 1700s. He also came up with one of my other favorite things, which was the flower clock. Okay, you've got to remember this was in the 1700s, where people had a bit more time on their hands. He came up with a flower clock. So he organized flowers from, I think, 6 in the morning until probably sundown, or even through the night. And his clock was based on which flowers opened at what time. So imagine, oh, there's the rose just opened, it must be 6 a.m. Oh, there's the tulip, time for tea, right? But he had literally every hour, there was a different type of flower that opened. So he obviously was very passionate about botany, and his works are still very relevant today. It's a fascinating topic. Just a side tangent there. Thanks for humoring me. So again, within mint, we have what in English we call ornamental mints, herbal mints, and true mints. And these will have different applications. It's really only the true mints that are used in a culinary application, so for drinks and for food and for eating. The rest grow wild or are used for floristry, for flowers and looking pretty. But one thing that all mints have in common, which is really the crux of why we're interested in mint as bartenders, is that they contain essential oils. And much like any citrus fruit, the peel, it's the essential oil that is the most valuable part because it's aromatic. And oil will attach itself onto molecules in the air. It'll sit on top of liquids like a cocktail, and it will be aromatic. It will smell nice. It will enhance your cocktail experience. And that truly is the heart of why we're so interested in mint. Aroma is a very powerful thing, right? When we smell something through our nose, it goes directly through an olfactory gland, which sits right up here. Now, you can't see it, but trust me, it's there. We all have it. And that olfactory gland receives flavors or receives aromas and sends them straight up to the brain. And the most interesting part is the part of the brain that these aromas first meet is what do we call it? The limbic part of the brain, which is dramatically associated with emotion and memory. So you know when you smell something and it reminds you of a time, it takes you back to your childhood or a person or that experience, and this kind of magical just connection with feeling something. And again, if you translate that to the cocktail experience, right? People don't drink cocktails because they're thirsty. They're looking for a journey. They're looking for adventure and experience. So when we can give them not only pleasant aromas that functionally set up their taste experience, but we also take them on a journey. Hopefully a good one. Hopefully it's not a sad memory that we've woken in them, because then it all goes a little bit pear-shaped. But for the most part, we're looking to associate with fond memories, because the power of aroma is very, very great in all of us. And in fact, I'm just going to read a little quote from one of my favorite books on this topic, which is called The Natural Sense of Smell by Helen Keller. Smell is a potent wizard that transports us across thousands of miles and all of the years we have lived. The odors of fruit waft me to my southern home, to my childhood frolics in the peach orchard. Other odors, instantaneous and fleeting, cause my heart to dilate joyously or contract with remembered grief. Even as I think of smells, my nose is full of scents that start awake sweet memories of summers gone and ripening fields far away. Well, if that's not worth $2 more on a cocktail, I don't know what is, right? Aroma is very powerful, memory and emotion. So just remember that the next time you're preparing your garnish for a cocktail. But can the sweet smell of mint be too much of a good thing for some people? This gentleman right here is Bill Don. If you've not heard of him, that's okay, but you'll have heard of what he does for a living. Bill has a mint farm in Kentucky in the USA. He grows 10,000 bunches of mint for the Kentucky Derby every year. He's been doing this a long time. He is now immune to the smell of mint. No wonder, right? Every day he's around the stuff, he's checking it, he's picking it, he's preparing it. So this poor gentleman has lost the joy of the aroma of mint, okay? So don't overexpose yourself to mint. Everything in moderation. And like I said before, it's truly the essential oils that we look for in the mint. That's where the magic lies. And literally, it lies on your mint leaf. It lies on the underside of the mint. That's where the essential oils are, on the underside of each leaf. You can tell the proportion of essential oils in different mint leaves by how hairy they are. So the hairier a mint leaf, the fuzzier it is, the less essential oils you'll have. So if you think about the mint that you use in your bar, you'll think about it being quite smooth. So we want smooth leaves to give us a higher content of essential oil. Therefore, we get more yield of aroma and magic from our leaves when they're smoother. So hairy, not so good. Just for mint, I'm talking about here. No judgments. I'm not here. You're all welcome. It's all good. Okay? And we'll get into that in just a second when we taste the mint together. But why do mint leaves have essential oils? Not all plants do. Historically, like most things, it was for a very natural reason. They have essential oils to protect their patch and give out signals to ward off other plants and say, no, this is my space. I'm going to grow here and I'm going to smell good and you can find somewhere else to grow. So it's giving natural signals out to other plants because mint actually grows quite quickly. It can spread quite well. So how does mint grow? To find out, Peter and I went up to the Chef's Garden in Ohio in the USA. Now the Chef's Garden grows herbs and flowers and micro vegetables for the very best restaurants all around the world. In fact, they probably have clients here in Mexico. Think of your top restaurants, and I'm sure they work with these guys. Farmer Lee Jones there on the right-hand side, this is his outfit every day. He even now makes t-shirts, so you can wear a t-shirt printed with his outfit. Anyhow, Peter and I went up to ask the experts, how does mint grow? What types of mint do you have? And really the experience there opened our eyes. So we've just shared a few photographs with you. These are some of the greenhouses where the mint grows in Ohio. Ohio gets very, very cold, and there's a lot of frost and snow during the winter. However, the exact location of this farm is very clever. It's a mile back from the lakefront, and it has some kind of a microclimate. It's not necessarily terroir, it's more about the weather, and it's actually protected from harsh frosts and winters. So delicate ingredients like the mints and the edible flowers that we see up there can actually grow, and they strive and they work very well in these conditions. So this is one of the greenhouses they use. This is some more mint here. If you do grow mint, whether it's at home or in the bar, there are some good things and some bad things. The good thing is that mint will grow anywhere, so you can probably all go home and start growing mint. It will work. Of course, mint smells great. I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't like the aroma of mint. I'm hoping it's not today. So it's a good thing to have around, especially in a bar because, hey, every once in a while, you get that kind of bar smell, right? Towards the end of the night, a little bit floor, a little bit wet rag, whatever you want to call it. So it's actually quite nice to have some mint around the bar. It also can help to drive away fruit flies from the bar, which I think we'd all agree we would welcome anything that helps us combat the pesky little fruit fly. So it's a good thing to have around, but it will spread. If you're growing mint at home, you need to contain it somehow, in a box, in a plant pot, in some kind of contained area, otherwise it will take over everything. Mint is actually considered to be a weed, which usually has negative connotations until you stumble across this lovely quote that says, well, if you think about it, if a weed is an unwanted item, a rose is a weed in a field of barley. And all of a sudden you have a bit more empathy for weeds, right? It's all about what you want where. So mint is easy to grow, and I encourage you to try it, but just be careful because it can spread quite quickly. Lord of the leaves. So we talk about mint a lot. We throw around the word very casually. There's actually the specific species of mint that we refer to when we say mint is that of spearmint. It's the most common type of mint. It's the mint that we use at the bar to make drinks, and it's the mint from which mint flavor is taken for a lot of the other uses of mint that we have in the world. So, enough talking. Let's get on to tasting some mint. So, this is a photograph from the chef's garden, and when Peter and I went up there, I don't know, there's maybe 20 different types of mint up here. We brought 10 with us today. We've got 4 for you all to share, and we're going to go through an interactive tasting right now so you can truly see the difference between different types of mint. And we'll also give you some tips on how to taste mint and get the most from it, right?
Thank you.
You want to explain?
Of course. Yeah, for me, it was going to the chef's garden was amazing just to see what they did at that family location. And again, like Charlotte said, how they shipped that mint around the world was amazing. We went into their packaging room, their shipping room, and things were coming down the conveyor belt, these beautiful packages of herbs and edible flowers labeled for Hong Kong and all over the world, and they would be at the restaurant the next day. So what this family does in this location, this tiny little town, is amazing. And I was really blown away by what they laid out for us, but also the extent of the mid category. I was always proud about using mint in cocktails and having it on display at the bars, and I grew up in a household where my mother was very proud of her gardens and the yards, but nothing to her was a weed. She loved anything that grew in her garden. But just to see this was amazing, and to learn what was in the mint family, including, or related to it, including marigolds and, like you said, sage. We have some mint on the table for you to taste. These are 4 examples. Like Charlotte said, we do have more in the back that are labeled. I'm going to need some help from the first positions in these rows over here. So we have glasses for you. We're going to start from the glass that's closest to you. All you need is a leaf, so just pick off a leaf and then send it down the line. The first one we're going to start with is Nepalita. So just like you would at your bar when you try and extract some oils, like Charlotte said, the oils are usually on the bottom. You might want to give it a quick light little tap just to break open the capillaries there and get the oils out. And just give it a nibble. You don't want to completely chew the leaf because it's going to turn bitter. All the tannins are going to break open, but just give it a little nibble.
And also consider how hairy or fluffy you think it might be. And if it's...
Are you talking about?
The mint. And if it's not too forward of me, you might want to just sort of lick the underside because that's where the essential oils are, and you'll access the flavor a little quicker.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we'll get to the cocktails in a little bit, but that's something to think about. When you rim a glass with citrus or when you rim it with a little bit of mint, think about which side of the mint leaf you should be using. If all the oils are in the bottom of the mint leaf, obviously that's the side you should be using to rim the glass. So this one you can see is very popular by its taste. It's a little bit of a cross between oregano and mint. Good crunchy texture, pretty pronounced flavor. And this one's very popular in the Tuscany region of Italy.
We have a question here.
Do we have it up there?
Nepetella.
Nepetella.
Yeah, the slide will come back on in just a second. And we also have all of these mints, as Peter said, at the back with the full labels from the chef's garden. So if you want to take photographs to remember the exact names, it's there for you.
So this one is typically used in dishes that contain mushrooms or green vegetables, just to add a little punch to it. But you can see how it fits into that Italian cuisine with a little bit of that oregano punch to it.
Yeah, this one is almost a little bit savory for me, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just that clean, fresh, awesome mint that we know. It's a bit more complex and savory.
All right, if I can ask your help again with the second jar. I think this is one of my favorites in the bunch, particularly for the way it looks. It's very striking. Looking at it, you would never think that this is mint. It is related to the marigold, and it does look like along those lines.
Yeah, maybe, could we get the slide back on?
Back
oh, thank you.
Native to Peru, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. This was very good as a pest control. Also great to cure colds and respiratory problems. So we see this as a very multi-purpose mint. where it's used in cuisine, like we learned with pest control, and as a health agent.
Yeah, and just a word on this, right? When you're smelling and tasting this mint and thinking how different it is to the first one, and how different it is to that classic mint or menthe that you know, then think about when you make a gin cocktail. And you spend a lot of time actually deciding which gin to put in that drink, because the delicate botanical difference can actually come through differently. So I think what we're trying to say here is you can apply that same level of attention to detail when it comes to what type of mint to put into your cocktail, because it does make a difference. This black mint is as different to spearmint as, I don't know, say Hendrick's gin is to something like Beefeater, right? And all of a sudden your cocktail has dramatically changed. So again, as bartenders, knowledge is power. The more we know about everything we use behind the bar can really open up new doors and make us more creative.
Or when using a softer gin as opposed to a more aggressive gin, you know, this might overtake a softer gin where you might want to go for something more aggressive. And in the U.S., I'm not sure about Mexico, but in the U.S. right now, savory cocktails are very big. So maybe this first mint, the Nepalita, is a lot better for a savory cocktail.
And lastly, again, on this black mint, if you have another sort of soft nibble and a lick, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. It's almost licorice, and it's almost sesame. And again, go back and taste it. You'll have your own impressions. But it's so much more than what we just think mint is. And it can be so much more when we come into using this in cocktails.
Yeah, that sesame is great. I get a lot of anisette on there,
Yep.
and a little bit of lime as well.
Cool. All right, moving on to the
Third one is our apple mint, which can demonstrate what Charlotte was talking about with leaves that might be a little bit fuzzier or furrier, not releasing as much oil.
So fuzzy, less aromatic. So pick up the apple mint. You'll feel that it's fuzzy. Smell it. It should be less aromatic to you off the bat than the others, proving the point about hairy and aromatic.
But on smelling it, you can see where it gets its name.
Yep.
Leans more towards the sweeter, refreshing style that we're used to with mint. Again, mild. This one is native to Southern Europe. And this one, very easy to grow inside. It only takes about 6 hours of sunlight. Pardon me. About 6 hours of sunlight, and it can grow inside very well.
So you still couldn't grow it in the UK then? 6 hours of sunlight a year or a day?
The season.
Okay.
This one's traditionally used for jellies, salads, and as a garnish.
Mm-hmm. Different, huh? Again, 3 completely different flavors, yet all of this so far is mint. So
this one's interesting for a cocktail. It's very mild up front, but as you let it sit on your tongue, there's almost a really sharp, not a flavor, but just a sensation, which for me, I probably wouldn't use it for a cocktail because I don't get much flavor. I just get more of a sensation that just might throw the drink off.
Yeah, it's almost got like a baby Szechuan button thing, like it's starting to impact how your mouth feels a little bit, starting to zing a little bit.
This is important, you know, when I work with bartenders and we work on cocktails, we taste everything, every base ingredient, we talk about it, and for me, a cocktail should always be greater than the sum of its parts. And in order to do that, you need to understand what each part is doing in a cocktail. Is it providing texture? Is it providing acid? Is it providing sweetness? Is it just providing flavor? And where is that coming from? And that's why even something with mint, when it comes in, you should just give it a nibble and see how it's doing that day.
The mint, right? Okay.
The bartender.
Oh. And the last
one's pineapple mint, which is probably very easily recognizable. I actually don't think we have pineapple.
Yeah, it's the last glass. It has like a yellow trim to the green leaf. So it's the most distinctive of the 4.
Get a little bit on the fuzzier side, but still more of a more flavorful, more pronounced than the apple mint. That border on it makes it great for garnishing. This one is candied a lot. And this one's native to Southwest Europe and the Mediterranean. But I think this one, even candying it on its own and just dropping it on top of a cocktail is very striking.
Great. It kind of feels like an awkward slow clap, but I know that you guys are just enjoying the mint tasting. Good. So lesson number 1, not all mint is the same, right? Dramatically different. Yes, it's accessible whether you order through the chef's garden or grow in your own bar. And think about the differences in mint as you may with gin or different types of tequila and how they can actually impact your cocktail or inspire new flavor combinations, right? Sometimes, first time you get a new bottle of spirit, you'll taste it, you'll note down aromas and flavors and nuances, and that'll inspire you with what to mix it. Same thing with any ingredient you're working with, and in this case, mint.
A lot of times people hand me a spirit, and I'm sure it happens to you too. They'll hand you a spirit and say, what cocktail would you make with this?
Yep.
Or how would you use it? And usually what I like to say is I like to take different spirits and put them into traditional formulas and just see how they change those formulas. So it's not about creating a new cocktail for each ingredient. It's about seeing how those ingredients play in traditional roles.
Great. Okay, so we'll move on. I think we just have the Mojito. So obviously one of the most famous cocktails using mint, and this is what we greeted you with on arrival because experience has proved that's a good thing to do when you meet people. It's hospitable, right? Welcome you all with a cocktail. Brief history on the Mojito. It's probably a descendant from a cocktail called El Draque. Definitely comes to us from Cuba, right? And like most classic cocktails, 2 things apply. Firstly, we don't really know who first invented it because these things weren't always recorded perfectly. And when you talk about anything to do with cocktails, there's drinking involved, which means there's loss of memory and lack of attention to detail, right? But we do know that it comes to us from Cuba. The second thing about classic cocktails is it has a lot to do with what was available when. Okay? You couldn't have the martini before the Italians decided to export vermouth to America because America was the place making cocktails, right? So it's about ingredients, what's available where, at what time, will pretty much dictate the flow of history and how you had rum and lime and mint together because those were 3 ingredients that were readily available in Cuba in the 1920s. Or with the Mojito specifically, we'll use the word yerba buena, which I understand for you guys in Mexico, your yerba buena, thanks to Jose Luis gave me a lesson, your yerba buena is with a green stalk, that's how you might identify it, whereas what you call mint or menthe has a red stalk to it. Maybe? Question?
The leaves sometimes they are like a 40. They are different. So one of the leaves they are more plain and another they are a little bit more.
Curly.
Curly. Okay, yeah. So again, so different types of species will have different properties in the way that they look and the way that they smell and taste, but it's all mint, okay? And if you think about the evolution of the Mojito itself, we're looking at a rum Ricky, which would be rum, lime, and soda, with the addition of mint, yerba buena, lo que sea. Yep. Mint was dramatically popular, at least in the UK where I was bartending in the very late 90s, and as well in America, as I hear from the stories. And it became one of those drinks with a bad reputation quite quickly, okay? And it was one of those drinks that someone came in and ordered a Mojito because of the beautiful aromas of mint. All of a sudden, everyone wanted a Mojito because everybody could smell the mint, right? And that's probably one of the reasons that it drove bartenders crazy. Because back then, we didn't necessarily have Jillian and Karina and those guys up here helping us to understand that the secret of one of the world's best bars is mise en place, right? If someone orders a Mojito from you and you have to go scurrying around finding the mint, taking it out of his packet, realizing that half of it is gone or rotten, and then you can't find your muddler, and when you do, it's kind of too embarrassing to bring out in front of a customer, and the whole thing just becomes a bit traumatic, right? But like any great cocktail bar, if you just set yourself up to make great mojitos, it's a stellar cocktail. There's really nothing not to love about it. It's one of the world's great sort of non-offensive drinks, and by that I mean, who really doesn't like a mojito? Come on, it's just refreshment, great flavor. If you've got a good rum in there, even better. So that was sort of a bit of the stigma around the mojito. Today, it's not really a cool drink, right? I mean, it's not really come back. At least not in America, but I think it should. I think we're working on that. Do you want to demonstrate the mojito? Yeah, we should.
I will.
Okay, so Peter is going to demonstrate the mojito, and I will just caveat this in saying the mojito is much like the Bloody Mary or even the martini, right? You probably all have the best way of making it. So Peter's going to show us his way of making it. It's not the only way. There are many different ways to go about making a mojito. So do you want to explain what you're doing as you go?
Will. All right, so a couple ingredients for the mojito. It is a drink built in the cocktail glass, in the Collins glass. I would even get a glass that's a little bit more narrow and tall. I think what I call a chimney glass. 12-ounce glass is perfect for a mojito. Really tall, really slender, and that drink looks great. I think some of the mistakes people make when making a mojito are volume of the glass. At least I see a lot of bartenders making a mojito in a pint glass, 16 to 20 ounces. That's way too big, so what do you end up doing? Well, you end up putting too much alcohol in there, so the drink can be really off balance or hot. Or you try and fill it up with a lot of soda water, and the drink becomes very watery, very weak, not flavorful at all. Also, another mistake, people don't use crushed ice. This surface area, the crushed ice, really chills down the drink, fills up the volume as well. And of course, people over-muddling the mint. As we all know as bartenders, and from that tasting, you don't need to over-muddle mint. Just a little bit of pressure there will release the oils. You don't need to break it up and release all the tannins in there. So you want to start with 6 to 8 really good, healthy-looking mint leaves.
And you're using spearmint for this one, right?
Spearmint.
Regular mint.
I like to put about 3 lime wedges in there. I'm going to use simple syrup today, so 3/4 of an ounce, equal parts, 3/4 of an ounce simple syrup and lime juice. And then from there, just a little bit of pressure to get the oils out of the mint, as well as the limes, and get some more juice out of the limes. So obviously I've started something with equal parts sweetener and acid, giving this, as people appreciate drier drinks these days, or not as sweet drinks these days, having a little bit of lime in there dries out the drink a little bit more. We're going to be using...
sorry, just by using the lime wedge, you're also maximizing the oils on the lime peel, as opposed to lime juice, which is, again, fine, but you get even more complexity from the oils from the lime skin.
Today we're making a spice for a mojito with Sailor Jerry, so 2 ounces of Sailor Jerry. And I really like to add my soda in at this point. I don't like to top it off. It's a tall drink that has a straw in there. We're sipping the cocktail from the bottom, so you're really not going to get a lot of that soda to the end. Also, soda acts as it's carbonation. So what is it doing? It's diluting the drink, but it's also adding a little bit of acid and a little bit of effervescence to the drink. So it's a really key component, but you don't need too much of it, about an ounce of it. And right there, I've already filled my glass halfway up, so I'm good on volume. I want to go about 3/4 of the way up with ice, and that's where I want to bring all the elements of the cocktail up and really integrate it. And from there, it's just packing it in with crushed ice. All right. And of course, our mint. And a little bit of a lime wedge. Now also think about something I talk to my bartenders a lot about, is thinking about the symmetry of a drink. You know, you wouldn't necessarily stick a straw right there. I always tell them you want to keep that straw next to your garnish. The drink looks a lot more symmetrical that way. It looks a lot more refreshing. But also when someone goes to drink the cocktail, their nose is right in that mint.
We have a question here in the
Yes.
front row.
I never shake a mojito. I think it tears the mint apart too fast. It's an extra step you don't need. I think building it's perfectly fine. You have all the elements there. You have the dilution, extra dilution from the soda water, and then you have the crushed ice, so I don't think you need to shake it.
When you use lime juice and no slices,
Slices?
we use the slices. At the beginning, like 1 and a
I did put some slices in there.
Yep, so Peter actually muddled fresh lime wedges. He didn't use juice.
But yeah, usually we don't use lime juice, just the lime slices.
You just use the lime slices. You can do it that way too. Another way I make it sometimes is with bar sugar, caster sugar without simple syrup, almost like you would a caipirinha. So on occasion I'll do it that way. I'll take the caster sugar and probably the wedges of an entire lime and work it in there. I set up a lot of bar programs. I train a lot of bartenders, and I really look at what they're trying to execute and how they're trying to execute it. If it's someone that might have a little bit more time to do that, I'd probably recommend that method as well.
Great. Did everyone enjoy the mojitos? Good. Well, the good news is we are ready to serve the next drink. I think that's coming along. So we're going to move on to another very famous cocktail that's centered around mint, and that's the Mint Julep. Pictured here beautifully. This cocktail photo was taken just before the Kentucky Derby last year, and the Mint Julep has become very famous for that one event, but of course the Mint Julep was around long before then. Is anyone here from Kentucky? Okay, well you
Has
can
anyone
close
been to
your
the
ears.
Derby?
So the julep itself, the word means medicine, right? It has a medicinal background, like most things in our industry, like gin, like mint. A lot of the ingredients we now use behind the bar originated as medicine. Alcohol itself was administered as medicine back in the olden days. The Mint Julep comes, we believe, not from Kentucky at all, but from the south part of the US, specifically the state of Virginia, which is why I asked if anyone's from Kentucky, because they hate it when you reveal that the Mint Julep wasn't actually invented in Kentucky. So they're very proud there. The Mint Julep, of course, is all about mint, it's all about bourbon, and it's all about the crushed ice. It's all about bourbon these days. It's all about the crushed ice that we use. And it wasn't really until what I like to call the second ice age, so not the first ice age, that was a whole different story, but when ice became available to people in warm climates, when ice became available to bartenders for the first time to make cocktails with. And we're talking the early 1800s when Frederick Tudor started on his world mission to provide warm climates with ice. Before that, you couldn't really make iced cocktails throughout the year. So the Mint Julep really relied on that whole scenario. And Frederick Tudor was a very wise, sharp guy, a young man who saw his father conduct international trade. He would take a boat from Massachusetts where they lived. They'd go all around the world buying goods, bringing them back to sell at home. And what Frederick Tudor figured out, as a lot of great businessmen do, is why would we send an empty ship out to the world? It's a waste of a journey. Let's fill it up with something that we have that we could sell around the world. And being up in Massachusetts in the wintertime, he understood that what they had to sell was ice. So he pioneered a lot of ice harvesting methods and actually put ice on boats and sent it around the world. And even more clever than that, when he got to ports like Charleston or New Orleans or Havana and all around the world, he actually made a point to connect with bartenders. So if you will, he was like a brand ambassador for ice. And he would get the bartenders and he would show them his product and he would teach them how to use it. And of course, he did that in the early 1800s, and then along come the cobblers and all the other wonderful cocktails that we have now that specify what type of ice they should be made with classically, right? So that second ice age really helped the Mint Julep spread and become popular. The evolution of the Mint Julep recipe. And again, this is a story that people from Kentucky sort of dismiss or don't like too, because the first Mint Juleps weren't even made with whiskey. They weren't made with bourbon. They were made with the spirits that were around the southern parts of the US in that time. And we're talking rum, which was the spirit of the day, imported cognac, if you could get to it. So this is a julep recipe from 1840, Joe Reddin's recipe. We've got cognac, rum, and port as the spirits, as the base of this julep. If we then take our Bible, Jerry Thomas's cocktail book, 1862, and we look up his julep, his original Georgia being a state in America, mint julep, he goes for equal parts cognac and peach brandy. No surprise, because Georgia is famous for its peaches, Georgia and South Carolina, and they would make local spirits. So no surprise is that this recipe then comes, the mint julep that came to his mind would have been made with these ingredients. Eric, you have a question? Yeah, a peach distillate of some sort, peach brandy as we'd sort of generally refer to it, yeah, a local spirit. And then if we think about today, what is commonly understood to be a mint julep, it's bourbon, sugar, mint, and crushed ice, right? And that's very much what the Kentucky Derby has sort of celebrated, and it's very much what we've come to understand as bartenders now. And much like all great classic cocktails, take the julep as a template and have fun with it. Change out the base spirits. Change out the type of mint you're using, maybe, if now you're inspired to do so. It didn't start with whiskey. It doesn't have to stay with whiskey. It can do. A bourbon julep is a wonderful thing. I've got nothing against it. But just to open your mind and ideas, try it with cognac. Try it with a peach brandy. It's really quite delicious. Kentucky Derby, of course, we've mentioned that a few times. That association is pretty tight. Right before we demo the mint julep, we get to my favorite slide of the presentation, the Julep Strainer. So this is a Julep Strainer. Are you all familiar? Yep, more or less. Cocktail Kingdom sell them. This is where I got mine from. Does anybody know why it's called a Julep Strainer? Perfect. Well, I'm going to explain, if that's okay. So if you make a mint julep, you'll find that actually you never reach for one of these to make a mint julep with, right? So you might think to yourself, well, then why call it a julep strainer? And the answer is because it was used to drink the first mint juleps. So back in the 1700s or whenever it was that people started drinking mint juleps, it was a different time, right? And as David Wondrich always likes to say, dentistry back then wasn't what it is now, meaning people had rotten teeth, right? They didn't have access to the sort of sanitary developments in the toothpaste world and such that we have now. So they had very sensitive teeth, and as you know, if you put your teeth into something very cold, it hurts, it's uncomfortable. So they came up with an idea to relieve this uncomfort or discomfort when drinking mint juleps, because if you put anything over crushed ice, as you've just experienced, it gets nice and cold very quickly. That's the whole point. It's hot down there, or up there, right? So they wanted the crushed ice. It was a very important part of the drink, right? But it was painful. So what they would do is they'd actually take one of these, or something that looked like this, a giant spoon with perforations, and they would put it over the top of their julep, and they would drink like this. The Julep Strainer kept the ice away from the teeth. Sounds similar to something else that we use these days, the straw. So you might be thinking, well, why didn't they just use a straw? It was the 1700s and they hadn't got around to inventing the straw just yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is why this is called the Julep Strainer. You don't need one to make a mint julep. Peter is now going to demo how we make our mint julep. But let me just tell you about this real quick first. So this is a beautiful slide taken in two locations. The first on the left here, this is me proudly holding a sprig of albino pineapple mint. Albino pineapple mint. So you've all seen the pineapple mint, right, green with the little yellow trim. This is an albino version. And albino mint is just as rare in mint as it is in people and hippopotamuses and anything else, right? It's quite uncommon. So there we were in the flower halls of the chef's garden at midnight, accompanied with a Victrola, and all of a sudden, I stumble across this beautiful kind of white mint and said, what is that? And they looked just as surprised. So that's the pineapple mint. I put that on Facebook, got a few likes. One of them was Naran Young, who was so inspired and moved by my photograph that he created his own pineapple julep, and it's on the menu at the moment at Dante, which is one of my favorite recent open bars in New York City. Next time you're in New York, if you're lucky enough to go, you should check out Dante. They have great cocktails. Anyway, Peter, mint julep.
You know it didn't get any likes on your Facebook?
Yeah, where's my Julep Cup? Yeah, no.
So
nobody-
items needed are a mint julep cup. I'm sorry, we don't have a mint julep cup. We're just going to use the top. I have a shaker set, bar spoon, crushed ice, some sugar, and base spirit. We're going to use monkey shoulder scotch, so not brandy, not bourbon, another whiskey, scotch. Here's where there's a lot of debates in the julep world, and one of them usually has to do with where does the mint come into the drink. Is it something that's infused into the base spirit? Is it something that's soaked into the sweetener, into the simple syrup? Is it something that's muddled into the drink? And almost like the debate of what you do with a lemon peel in a Sazerac, what you do with the mint in a mint julep does cause some debate here. So I like to muddle a little bit, just a couple of pieces of mint at the bottom. I'm using a minted simple syrup, which you have in the wine glass, but which we'll address in a little bit. And for me, a mint julep should sit on the sweeter side, so I'm going to do a healthy 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. Something to watch out for with juleps are ABVs. So right now we're at 40% alcohol here. Traditionally, I'd like to do it something closer to 100 proof, because after you dilute with all that ice, you do start to weaken the drink a little bit, obviously. So I'm actually going to go I'm going to deviate from my 2 ounces and do a healthy 3 ounces in this.
Whoa.
Whoa, crazy.
Great drinks start with responsible measuring. Check.
Give it a little bit of press. If I were making this behind the bar and I had multiple drinks to do, I would probably leave that for about a minute, go do something else, and come back to it. Let the mint leaves kind of sit and macerate for a little bit. Now, Julep Cup is key. You should have some behind the bar, because what's happening here is a little bit of science. The alcohol here is dropping the freezing point of water. So as you start to circle your spoon around here, as you spin your spoon around, the water, the mixture here, the drink, is becoming colder than the freezing point of water. And then what that does is it starts to pull the air molecules from the surrounding air, from the air around it, and they start to accumulate right here in the glass, and you have this nice frosting. So that eventually will build up and insulate the drink. So even though you're building with crushed ice, this drink is going to be very cold for a long time, or as long as it takes you to drink it, I guess. And of course, the other key element here is the mint sprigs. Don't be shy with the mint sprigs in a mint julep. Get as many as you can in there. I like to plunge them right in the middle. I mean, it's a mint drink, and it should look like a julep. No, I've lost my straws. There we go. Thank you. And a lot of times I'll take my straws and I'll cut them down a little bit. Thank you. Just so they're shorter than normal, so you really get your nose right in that mint when you go to drink it. And you can see that frosting on the glass on the julep cup starting to build up. Obviously, if this were a true julep cup, that frosting would be a little bit more formed at the moment.
How good does that look? Right? And you all have a julep in front of you, so yeah, thank you, Peter.
It's good with 3 ounces of scotch.
Yeah, I bet it is. So we come now to the moment that you've all been waiting for, and I'm telling you that because it's true. Peter's now going to talk about the most applicable part of the seminar to you all as bartenders, and that is how to receive, store, and present mint in the very best way at your bar so that your cocktails really shine. So I'm going to advance here, and I'm going to talk about mint on the bar top.
So a little bit of a caveat from me. Again, like I said, I set up a lot of bars, and what I really like to do with bartenders is get them to think about their guests as they approach the bar. So I do a lot of work with bartenders as they, teaching them how to work with the tools on the bar top, how they move, how they reset themselves. And all this is cues to your customer about how professional you are and how well you run your bar. And Charlotte said earlier that some bars don't always smell the best. And our bars, my bars, we treat them like a kitchen. We scrub them down at the end of the night and make sure they're completely clean. But also when someone steps up to that bar, that bar should paint a picture. Whatever you have on your back bar with liquors, however you decided to lay those out, that should tell the story of what you're serving. As well as what's on the front of the bar, how your tools are laid out. That should give people clues to your ability of what you can serve that guest. And mint is a big part of that. And I always call it a billboard, and I call it a cheap advertisement, honestly. For just a few pennies, you can put this mint, and as we've been discussing, mint evokes a lot of emotions, a lot of sensations, a lot of pleasurable sensations as soon as people see it. So right now, before you've even talked to them, they've stepped up to your bar, and they've got a smile on their face, and they're remembering something special. and they're already feeling more comfortable being in there just for a few cents of setting that mint out right now. We don't have a lot of cocktails on the menu currently at one of the bars I run, the Sparrow, but still every day I have them set out 3 of these along the bar just for that, thank you, just for that purpose. Treat it like any other cut garnish. You would wash it, and we're going to talk about that. At the end of the night, you would throw it away. It's been sitting on the bar top for 6, 8, 12 hours. I see a lot of people try and reuse it. Even though it still looks good, it's not really going to hold up the next day, but it's in a bar environment for 12 hours, so it's best not to reuse a lot of that. Oh yeah, okay. And with the mint on the bar top, there are really 3 things we're trying to preserve or enhance. One is the color of the mint, that really nice bright green color. The oils, of course, that's where we're going to get our flavor from. And the firmness of the drink. You know, you want that mint to sit in a drink really tall and really proud. You don't want it kind of limped over and just looking sad. So with this method, we're going to show you how to preserve mint so it looks bright, colorful, smells well, and works well in a cocktail. And I'm sorry, I've been bartending for 15 years in Chicago. So I've never worked in another bar in another country, so I'm going to talk about how we get mint, at least in Chicago, and hopefully it'll apply to what you're doing. But really the tools you're going to need, okay. So when I get mint, oddly enough, this mint is from Mexico, so I'm just bringing it back home. It comes in these 1-pound containers. Obviously, some of it's missing. These 1-pound containers. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So the items you're going to need are these Cambros, these plastic containers, a cutting board and a knife, a couple of deli containers. I think that's it. Actually, 2 of these deli containers. All right, so to prep the mint, first thing I'm going to do, if you're not using it, keep it in the refrigerator in this packaging. This is the best thing it can come in. This is the way it's going to stay safe. Don't remove it from there. For some reason, I see a lot of people in the kitchen take the mint out, and they roll it up in wet paper towels, and they put it in those fish boxes, which I find degrades the mint faster. I really find just leaving it in this plastic bag, in this plastic container, works best. So what I would do from there is take the mint kind of one by one and start to work off the leaves, just retaining these really beautiful crowns or heads of the mint.
Did you train as a florist?
All right, and I'm going to keep these leaves. I'm not going to discard them. So I would kind of work this until I've got about enough that would fill up a julep cup on the bar top in my hand. You could put a rubber band around it if you want, and then take a Cambro that's full of ice water and just plunge the mint head down into the Cambro and leave it in there at least 10 minutes. If it's longer, it doesn't matter. My bartenders have worked this into their routine where they'll do this, they'll plunge it in, and then go work on something else for a little while. And then you'll take it out after at least 10 to 15 minutes. And kind of what I like to do is that, which gets the water off the leaves, but kind of also opens them up a little bit. And if you're looking at the bottom, go back one slide. Go back, I think. Go back. Yeah. So when you get the mint, just like you would cut flowers.
You did train as a florist.
I didn't want to answer that question. The stems have cauterized. They've sealed up. So they're not going to take up any water if you leave them as is. So it's really important you cut the bottoms of the stems just like you would fresh flowers. Just go ahead 2 slides, I think. The evidence deepens. Oh, sorry, back one. There. And just cut it at an angle. And then from there, this is the goofy part that seems to be throwing people off, is I would take it and I would put it into a julep cup on the bar top in warm water. And the water you could get off of if you have a hot coffee tower, if you have an air pot, if you have something that I forget what those are called, just heats up water behind the bar. The water should be hot enough that you can stick your thumb in it and it feels hot, but you're not scalding your finger. It shouldn't be boiling, because that would, of course, ruin the mint leaves. But you just want to put it down into the julep cup, and kind of splay open the leaves. And this one and the one we did at the back, I did at noon, so now it's been up for 5.5 hours. That one was off the bar top. I had noticed it. It was at the end of the night. That had been there for, I think, 8 to 9 hours. So this really works in keeping your mint fresh the entire night. Sometimes you might find that you'll have to add a little bit more hot water throughout the night, but that's not a big deal. Just change out the hot water. Now, as far as the loose leaves, what are you going to do with those? I used to insist on my bartenders each time taking the mint, if they had to make a mojito, for example, take the mint and pick off the leaves off the stem. I just found that loose leaves never held the oil to make a drink properly. But what I found is if you use this technique, or part of this technique with the loose leaves, you're going to have the same results. So what I would do with the loose leaves that I've picked off the stems, I would also throw these into an ice bath and let them soak for about 10 to 15 minutes. I'd strain it off through a china cap, through a strainer, and from there I'd put them into a deli container, or I'd put them into a plastic container with a little wet towel on the bottom, wet towel on top, and just having soaked those leaves for 10 to 15 minutes will help lock in those oils, so now you still have fresh leaves and you're not wasting all those extra leaves.
So when Peter presented this last year in July, we had a lot of questions, a lot of hands went up. Do you really mean hot water? Surely that wouldn't work. It absolutely does. And since we made that presentation, bartender by bartender, bar by bar, people have taken the leap of faith and they've tried the Vestinos method and had dramatically great results every single time. Please try this in your bar because it does work. Okay? And if any of you want to come up and get this presentation from us at the end, just come up and I'll take your emails and we'll share it with you. Peter has also shared this online on Facebook. It's circulated. We have another seminar together next month in Chicago to talk about this because it honestly it improves mint in every single bar, and we're all about making better drinks for everyone. So please trust this man. I said it last year, I say it now, even with more confidence because we've seen it everywhere. Do it.
For me, it's so bizarre because it's something I've taught for years, and then people keep asking me, does it work? And I don't know why we have this conversation. I just do it.
Just do it.
Doesn't take that much more time.
We should get those T-shirts for you.
Just do
it.
The step-by-step method for this is also on my website, thebarmedic.com, under blogs, so if you want to go there, you can find it there.
Good question? Yep.
Does that assume that you get your mint delivery first thing in the morning? What happens if you get it the night before you got to make it last the next day?
I get my produce delivered at one of my bars. I get produce 2 times a week, one of them once a week.
So then do you do that with the mint and then keep it for the week, or do you keep it in its wrapper?
Per service. So I keep it in this, in the walk-in. Oh, here, thank you. It just made me think of something. So I keep this in the walk-in for the entire week until I need it, and we do this right at the start of service. Now, if you're a very busy bar and you need a lot of heads of mint, here's what you can do. Once you've taken this out of here and you've cut the stems, you can put it into warm water, into a deli container, and put it into the walk-in or the reach-in behind you. And then when you're ready to use it, just transfer it into a hot glass of water. So if you're working a mojito bar where you're going through a lot of these, and you don't want them all on the bar top at the same time, you need a reserve of them, put them in a deli container with slightly warm water. It's going to chill, obviously, being in the refrigerator, but then bring them out and put them into hot water. One thing to be careful of, which I've learned the hard way, is you have fans going in your refrigerators. Don't put the mint too close to the fans because it burns them. They'll just turn black. Yes?
Is there a special reason for the warm water? Does the mint leaves absorb it quicker, or do they dry out as fast?
Science. You know what?
It just sort of works.
Just works. I mean, sometimes just do it. It just works.
I don't think Charlotte knew what she was bargaining for when she asked me to do this seminar, but I had always done this method, but I didn't, through trial and error over years. And then I said, I'm going to do it a little more scientifically. So I did one day take mint and I put it in water without cutting the stems. I put it in water that was cold, lukewarm, very hot. put the mint head down in hot water. You know, I did all these variations and took photos of them, and then this was just the best result.
Ignorance is bliss sometimes. We don't need to know why. It's our gift from us to you. Another question here.
Do you have any tips, or is there any way? Sorry. Is there any way to revive mint that started to, like maybe day 3, or is there, no solution for that?
Unless it's too far gone, if it's just been sitting out for about an hour or 2, you can revive it doing this. It'll come back for sure. If it started to really wilt and turn brown, you might have gone too far. But I encourage people, because for me, this costs $8. And I'll get 6 different julep cups full of mint. So that's really not a lot of money for that advertisement. And again, I want my bartenders to get rid of it at the end of the night. So I encourage people to rotate through it. Don't have a lot of mint rotting in the refrigerator and then have rotting mint on the bar top. Get rid of that old mint and bring the fresh mint in and just keep rotating through.
Yeah, with the price of design of bars these days, $8 is actually a bargain to make your bar look and smell great. Have another question right here.
Yeah, Peter, does it work with other herbs too, like basil or something?
Honestly, I found other herbs work better in cold water.
Okay.
Mint is the one that wants the hot water.
Thank you.
But as far as the first part of this technique, head down in cold water, cutting the stems, yes, do that. But other herbs I found want cold water.
Question from the gentleman in the front row.
What is the best temperature to preserve in that container for one night, the lips?
The cold
the
water
best
or the hot
temperature
water?
in the container for one night? What is the best temperature
For one night?
to preserve the lips? Yeah, what's the temperature you need to preserve it?
Oh, whatever my walk-in's at, which I think is 38 degrees Fahrenheit.
38 degrees.
A regular refrigerator, but keep it in the container it comes in.
Yeah.
You only do the Vestinos method ahead of every shift. Okay? Honestly, it works, okay? So, we're going to move on.
We don't know the science, we don't know why.
We're going to kind of quickly zip through a few extra things, and then we'll get to our third cocktail, the grasshopper. So these are some other uses.
Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, just like, when we add little touches in my bar, for example, like the salt with a margarita. We take citrus, we dry out those citrus peels, we grind them into a fine powder, and then we mix them into the salt. It's a little touch we don't tell people about necessarily, we don't promote it, but it's just there, and it's another great thing that people can enjoy. You can do the same thing with mint. If you have these extra mint leaves, put them in a little bit of sugar, you've created minted sugar, and maybe if you're making sidecars, it's kind of a nice touch that people might not always recognize, but it's a nice surprise for them too. But it's a great use for mint leaves.
Good. And then the mint syrup. So as Peter mentioned earlier, I have so many glasses in front of me, and they all look the same. This one. So you'll have a little bit of mint syrup in front of you, and this comes by way of our dear friend, Jeffrey Morgenthaler, out of Portland in the United States. This is his recipe for mint syrup. And honestly, I hate to admit it, I'd never tell him, but it's honestly the best recipe for mint syrup that I've come across. It works every time. Making a mint simple syrup can take out one part of the process if you're a busy bar and concerned about velocity and using fresh mint, right? The trouble is, every time I used to make mint syrup, it always turned brown. This method that Jeffrey has, you usually get a slightly brighter green than this one. We'll blame it on the altitude.
You can blame it on me.
Okay. But anyhow, this is a recipe. Highly encourage you to follow this recipe or try it. And furthermore, I encourage you to buy Jeffrey's book. It's called The Bar Book. If you can't remember that, I'll remind you at the end of the session.
And of course, for making massive volumes of drinks, like today, it really helps.
So medicinal properties of mint. We spoke about this earlier a little bit, how gin and various botanicals and medicines and liqueurs all seem to have medicinal roots. Mint is no different. And here are just some of the conditions that mint can save you from. I'll let you read that at your leisure, in no particular order. And of course, mint is used as a flavoring agent in different types of ingredients behind the bar.
Yeah, peppermint more so than spearmint. Peppermint extracts a little bit better in distillation. These are some examples, of course, Creme de Menthe, Giffard's Menthe Pastille, Death's Door Wonder Mint out of Wisconsin, Dry Fly, I forget where they're out of, Oregon, I believe. Anyone? was one of the only gins we could find with peppermint in it.
Yeah.
Fernet Branca, of course, a very popular. Charroux, which is a aloe liqueur, has
Yep.
spearmint in there. St. George Terroir, out of California, has sage, which we've said is in the mint family.
Yep.
Enlightened Grain also has sage. Absinthe, of course, has melissa and hyssop in it, which are part of the mint
Part
family.
of the mint family.
And Art the Age Sage, of course, has sage in it.
Yep. Okay, good. Moving on. The king of mint liqueurs, Creme de Menthe, which is a nice kind of tee up to our next cocktail.
Real quick on the Creme de Menthe, what I learned about Creme de Menthe is that it's distilled a lot like gin. If you just tried to distill the extracts of peppermint, you would get a lot of menthol notes. It'd be extremely harsh, almost like a menthol cigarette. I assume. I've never had a menthol cigarette. But if I had one right now, it'd probably be pretty harsh. So you have a lot of different botanicals in there, just a lot of citrus peel, coriander, a lot of things you'd find in gin. I couldn't get the full recipe out of Tempus Fugit, but they just told me there would be citrus and coriander in there as well. But also because that mint flavor happens at a very specific point in the distillation, you have a very tight cut on that distillation on the hearts. That's another reason creme de menthe, good creme de menthes, can be really expensive, and that's why another reason a lot of people have generated these cheap creme de menthes that are compounded. So to get a good creme de menthe, it has to be distilled properly. And the proper way to enjoy creme de menthe is traditionally after dinner and with a little bit of soda water added to it. And it's fantastic. Give it a try. That soda water opens up the spirit, but also, again, soda, carbonation, acid, helps to bring up that, cut through that sweetness of the creme de menthe.
Yeah, great. And then Creme de Menthe is another one of those brands that has pretty pictures, or one of those liqueurs from their advertising. You want to speak a little bit about Wondermint, which is a recent, no?
No,
Checking it out,
it's
right?
pretty straightforward. From Wisconsin, a Death Store recipe they discovered in the 20s. Calls for peppermint again, and wormwood and almond extract.
Yeah, I'm guessing this probably isn't available in Mexico, so we'll just move on.
Move on.
And these are some slides again, just to sort of show you what we have up here. If you'd like to receive this presentation, we can share it with you. This is from our friends at Giffard. They make a beautiful range of liqueurs, and one of my favorites is their Menthe Pastille, which comes from a specific species, again, of peppermint from a place in England. So that's from them. And we move on. Did you want to talk about Branca Menthe a little bit?
I mean, Maria Callas, the famous singer, had the habit of adding minted syrup to her Fernet just to sweeten it and brighten it up a little bit. And from there, Fernet developed Branca Menthe.
Yep. Good. So we're going to move on to our third cocktail, which I think you all have in front of you if it's not already gone. And it's the grasshopper. Really, the only thing you need to know about this, it's everybody's mum's favorite cocktail. Am I wrong? No. Thank you.
No.
So the grasshopper was actually invented in New Orleans, which, as so many great cocktails were, and it's one of the reasons that Tales of the Cocktail thrives in that city. Its birthplace is a place called Tujax, which is still there. You can still go in and have a grasshopper in the very place that it was invented, which is kind of rare these days when we come to classic cocktails, sadly. It's a dessert drink. It's a creamy drink. It's not necessarily a serious drink, but most importantly, it is a delicious drink, and it celebrates another kind of end of the scale of how mint is used in bars as a flavor. So, Peter, did you want to demonstrate our twist on the grasshopper?
Of course, and I can't remember what Chicago bar this comes from. I apologize.
So this comes from a bar in Chicago.
Equal parts cognac, so half-ounce cognac, half-ounce white creme de cacao, half-ounce creme de menthe white, and then half-ounce creme de menthe green for our color. And replacing the half and half, of course, with ice cream.
Of course.
Because we like to stay healthy in the Midwest. All right.
And what's with the cognac addition here? I mean, it's delicious. Is there a reason historically?
talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
What was the question? Why cognac?
The question was, is there a reason for cognac in this drink? Is it just because it's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea. I think it just really adds depth to the cocktail. Really, with the dilution of the ice cream, adds an extra flavor layer to it. This should be blended. I'm not going to attempt a live blender demonstration, so let's see how we do shaking it.
I'd say he shakes pretty well. There you go. You got one clap. Oh no, no. They're just tasting their mint. They're not actually clapping for you.
Look at that color. What I really like about the drink is the melding of the Irish coffee with this, where the inventor of this drink has taken fresh whipped cream and, much better than I have on the fly here, layered the ice cream, the whipped cream, and added a sprinted mig.
Cheers. That's very good, right? Do you guys like that one? This is actually a cocktail that is back, at least in America. It's kind of one of those sort of kind of love to hate, ironic, cheesy old drinks that's back in fashion. It's a beautiful little drink to finish a meal with, so big fans.
If anyone tells you we're throwing away our blenders and ice cream drinks in the U.S., they're coming back.
Tell us about this little guy.
Oh, this is just a variation of the grasshopper I did at one of the bars I ran, using Fernet Branca, finest fruits Mastica, creme de cacao, and an Old Tom gin.
Is that when you were too embarrassed to put ice cream in it?
Probably do well with maybe some Greek yogurt. No.
Good. Well, with that drink, that brings us almost to the end of our presentation. You want to talk about this one?
Another bar in Chicago. They did this out of a ice cream machine, just constantly turned behind the bar. And last year, this was one of the biggest drinks in Chicago. Got a lot of press. It's from a bar called Best Intentions. And I couldn't tell you the amount of press or social media hits these guys got from this cocktail.
Yeah, this recipe is slightly more complicated than the one that we showed today.
It's definitely one that if you could put into an ice cream machine ahead of time, then you just have to pull the handle and you're good to go.
Good stuff. With that, we come to the end of our presentation. We've probably got time for a couple of questions if you have them. Otherwise, yeah,
that's the mint syrup.
Yeah, the mint syrup. Were you taking a nap? It's from Jeffrey Morgenthaler's book, The Bar Book.
I made it on the fly. I apologize. It should be a lot brighter green. I've done this in the past. Like Charlotte said, she didn't want to like it. And when I looked at it first, I said, this isn't going to work. And then I made it, and it really does makes this beautiful bright green syrup that's a lot brighter than what I've done for you today.
Yeah, so we wanted to bring that to your attentions for two reasons. One, it's a great way to jump ahead in a process step. If you're a busy bar, making a minted syrup means you don't necessarily have to add fresh mint. And secondly, Jeffrey Morgenthaler finally came out with a really great recipe to make the mint syrup that was green rather than brown. So that's just why we wanted to call it out. And again, it's in the presentation that we're happy to share with you. Question in the back.
Could you all bring back that recipe real quick?
Which one?
Which one, the grasshopper?
The mint syrup.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was that passive-aggressive or just curiosity? Just kidding. More questions? Well, in that case...
Oh, we got one.
Oh. Where?
Here.
Okay, right there. The
5
man
rows
with
back.
the bow tie and the lei. Here we go.
Hola, mi nombre es Ricardo de Artemisia Bar.
Hi.
Mi pregunta es muy sencilla. ¿Ustedes están acostumbrados a recibir la menta
Sí.
empaquetada, así como con conservadores para que dure más tiempo? Pero nosotros aquí en México la recibimos casi directo, así recién cortada, porque
Sí.
no dura mucho tiempo. ¿Cómo es diferente o es igual el proceso de conservación que sucede con ustedes?
Sí, pues unas cosas. Primero, puedes buscar o se pueden buscar otros proveedores de menta, de hierbas, ¿no? Para ver si hay menta de mejor calidad. Por este seminario, Peter y yo trajimos menta, ¿no? Que O sea, es una vergüenza que hay que traer Menthe a un país para hacer este tipo de seminario. Hay proveedores mejores, estoy seguro, ¿no? The Chef's Garden sí funciona globalmente. No son caro que es fuera de su alcance. Entonces, ¿cómo? Eso no sé, pero podemos verlo. Compartir los datos para verlo. Pero el segundo es trabajando con el Menthe que sí tienes. Puedes usar este tipo de contenedor para guardarlo, ¿no? Puedes conseguir así algo de plástico, esta caja de plástico, bolsas de plástico y guardarlo en el refrigerador, como dijo Peter. O sea, la Menthe que pedimos acá vino en estos tipos de... You're like, I trust you that you say.
Just do it.
Viene en estos rollos de papel, pero no era de la mejor calidad. Por eso usamos el nuestro que trajimos. Pero sí, usa el Menthe que traen, guárdalo así, pero prueba el método Vestinos. El método Vestinos, ¿no? A ver si tienen mejor resultados. Sí. Pero sí, es un punto muy, muy válido. Obviamente, no puedes sacar buenos resultados si no tienes las materiales buenas. Sí, de nada. Yes.
I'm very glad that you mentioned Mr. Morgenthaler. I follow his work a lot, but you know, he was very famous for his oleum sacrum method, which I think it's incredible.
With the sous vide?
Yeah, with the vacuum.
Cryovac, I'm sorry,
yeah,
cryovac.
with
Yep.
the vacuum. Would you recommend to actually make us a syrup out of oleum sacrum, but instead of citrus from herbs?
That's not a bad idea. I mean, essentially, it's the same thing, right? You're taking the essential oils, which mint and citrus have in common. So I've never tried that. Have you?
Yeah, where you're saying take the oils out of the mint into the sugar?
Well, the minted sugar, I guess,
Yeah.
is kind of halfway
I've
there.
done that. It's not that strong. It just gets, you get a little bit when you taste the syrup, but then by the time you get to the cocktail, it's not as powerful as it would be if you just made the
syrup by
the
itself?
syrup. Yeah.
Okay.
But it does work. You do extract the oils. You have the same result where the sugar becomes wet. I have put it in the cryovac bags as well. It just at the end of the day, it never comes out as strong.
Yeah, honestly, this recipe for mint syrup is the best that we've both found in our combined many years of bartending. So.
And well, the other step we didn't really touch on is what we're doing here is blanching the mint.
Yeah.
So we're putting in hot water, then cold water.
Yeah.
So the mint is becoming brighter green, and that's really the key to this cocktail.
Exactly.
This syrup.
The syrup. Thank you.
I would assume the same. Well, it's a 2-to-1 simple syrup, so I'd say on the long end, 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks.
Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I hope this was very interesting to you. Mint is such a common ingredient that we all touch, but with a little bit of time and research, you can actually improve the way that we use it and improve the cocktails, which is the whole point of why we come together. It's the whole point of why Tales of the Cocktail wanted to come to Mexico and meet you all and learn from you as you can from Tales. So thank you for your time today. A huge thank you to Peter and his genius método.
Thank you.
Thank you to our sponsors, Sailor Jerry and Monkey Shoulder. Have a wonderful time tonight. Whatever you guys are doing, go out and explore the wonderful bars of Mexico City. And we look forward to bumping into you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you. Gracias.
Appreciate it.